I'm Erin Lawler Patterson, the Goodness Chick. I'm an international speaker, life coach, author, and proud part of the Mental Health News Radio Network. Join me on the journey of empowering you to kick butt in life, not get kicked by life, addressing mental health, relationships, self-care, and giving back. So I know the next few months for a lot of people can be kind of tough when it comes to the time change. It's darker, it can get colder depending on what area of the country or the world that you're in. One of the things I'm going to throw at you to think about, if you have not already done so, please hop on Amazon and check out 2 of my books. Great ways for encouragement, personal challenge, being inspired, and whether you're reading by the fireplace or on your lunch break or whatever it is at the gym, what we put into our minds is super duper important. So check them out on Amazon. Peace, Love, and Goodness, Lessons from the Drug Lady, as well as A Higher Level of Goodness, Lessons from the Drug Lady, author, me, yours truly, Erin Lawler Patterson. And in just a few months, very excited because Around the World with the Goodness Chick will be released. Very proud of all 3 of these manuscripts. This one that's going to be released shortly, in particular, just where it's taken me like literally around the world and the reflections that go along with that. Super proud, super pumped, and great ways using literature to kind of fill our minds, our hearts with inspiring, encouraging, positive things when we have different seasons of our life, both literally and figuratively. And as we go into today's episode, I am mentally shooting off fireworks. I'm having a cake that I did not bake, but I'm thinking it's right in front of me because Goodness Chick has officially, it's my 100th podcast episode. Woo! Mazel tov, excitement, awesome. For those of you who've been following, literally 2 years as of this month, started Goodness Chick, and it had a whole lot of reflection going on of, oh my gosh, 2 years. And I wanted to just kind of share with you some of the things I've taken, some of my favorite podcasts, lessons I've learned, the journey, literal journey in the past 2 years is wild and crazy. So I went back to my first episode, right? Went all the way back and I'm like, okay, I think it's been about 2 years. November of 2017 is when the first Goodness Chick podcast aired. So I'm going to kind of go into this for those of you guys that know me personally, or you just feel like you've gotten to know me, and I hope you have, on my podcast or on my Facebook page, Instagram, yada, yada. I do try to be as personal, transparent as I can. And I'll kind of walk you through a little bit of my journey where about 2.5 years ago, I had met somebody and I had heard murmurings, like I had friends of mine that were, into podcasting, and my mind can kind of be swirling, twirling craziness sometimes, or I just have a lot on my plate, or just lacking organization where it was podcast. It was very late to the podcast listening train, and a little delayed in being an actual podcaster, but that's okay because it's never too late, right? Life is a process. And I remember just kind of having it just not in only my mind, but my heart, like, wow, what a dynamic way to kind of get a message, just encouragement and hitting on topics. And at the time, initially, it started with parenting teens and how it's kind of blossomed into more dealing with mental health, mental wellness, on a whole different level in terms of, learning how to essentially kick butt in life without feeling like life is coming down on us. So it's evolved in so many different ways. And I'll tell you this, where when I first thought about podcasting, I'm a pretty extroverted individual, right? I've had my hand in a lot of different things over the years. There was absolutely an element of fear, right, that kind of resided in the back of my mind, which I think exists. I'm pretty confident with most of us when it comes to something different, a different challenge, a different path, a different route. And it could be, oh my gosh, not only is it scary because it's something new, right, but what if this doesn't work? What are people going to think? I'm actually putting my voice out there, talking about a heap of different topics. Some things are extremely personal, some things that are going to be very personal to that listener who's hearing something that just hits them for the first time. Whoa, it's very raw, it's very intense. What are people going to think of me, right? Because judgment can be a factor. And so it was kind of putting that to the side. And I remember my very first podcast, right? I had taken notes and where do I see this going? I was at the time, we were renting a shore house in Long Beach Island in New Jersey. And it was this like super duper small small house where if you breathe, like you could hear the person next door, right? So, and I loved where we lived. We're like, 127 feet from the ocean, but still, working full time, coming home, my at the time, I guess he was 2.5-year-old. I want to play, mommy, 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 and trying to fit in podcasting time. Dude, it was madness. I remember having the laptop, this was my official studio, on top of a bureau in our bedroom. And I had my mic next to me and, whatever else. And it was like I had 45 minutes to tape, right? And so it was 1, 2, 3, boom, here we go. And it was kind of just rolling with what I had, right? I mean, little house, when I tell you acoustics were super not great. I had nothing fancy, machine or anything like that. I just had to roll with it. It was what resources I had accessible to me at the time. And talking about what the Goodness Chick mission was and where it kind of stemmed from. And I think, I was nervous. I actually was nervous. I don't get nervous too often with things, but it was, wow, I'm really putting myself out there. What if this podcast doesn't take? And then it's like, well, what if it doesn't? Who cares, right? And when there's different areas of our life, it's time, I think it's so important to step back and say, so if this doesn't stick, this doesn't work, this thought doesn't go forward, what's the worst thing that can happen? And for me, one of the cool things I take from this is that this is something I get to put out there for friends, for family members. And, it's my opinion. It's my journey through life. And if those are the only people who listen, right, then that it is what it is. And even if they don't listen, it still exists. And what's been really neat over the past 2 years, 24 months, how it's really evolved and become so much more than that. And maybe 2 months ago, a month ago, I was hopped on Spreaker and I looked at my demographics where people were listening, right? And I'm pretty challenged when it comes to anything technology. Like that is my husband. I am really super neat summer school, like big time, right? But I remember hopping on and looking at a map of the world and where Goodness Chick listeners were. And I was like, what? From, North America to pockets. It was Chile. It was Australia had a pretty strong representation. Dubai, Israel. I was like, what? A number of countries in Eastern Europe. And it was, wow. And so what I say to you guys, to anybody that's kind of been chomping at the bit, or you've had things looming in your head of something that might sound crazy, might feel uncomfortable, what is there to lose, right? And where is it going to take you? And because life, sometimes you're going to trip, sometimes you're going to fall. I will say without question, what has made me stronger has been my stumbling throughout different courses in my life where I failed at things. It just didn't work, right? Is Goodness Chick, on billboards and, on whatever, I'm not being listened to by millions and millions and millions of people, but I've got a pretty good stat showing and it's awesome. And to me, it's awesome. And it's a sense of empowering. And I got to tell you, I love when my son will say, mommy, did you do your podcast? Like he knows the word podcast. What? Your Goodness Chick work. And what it means about trying to spread goodness and empowering people and talking about things that we can sometimes get uncomfortable about. My little guy's talking about it. What? That's awesome. It's awesome, right? So Goodness Chick started in this little, super small little space. And from number 1 to 100, it's literally taken me around the world. And that is so awesome. To me, it's empowering. And thinking about the different messages that I feel like resonate with so many people, I'm going to throw you, one of my favorite episodes was called Stepping Up, Speaking Up, and Getting Our Humanity On. And the relevance of talking about when we see something that's not right, that's not okay. And instead of staying quiet, saying something, and how too often we can close our eyes and remain silent about things that really, really matter. And I think I know it's so important to talk about. I think about whether somebody's in high school, they're in middle school, they're retired. We can succumb to this pressure of just, I'm going to stay quiet because it's none of my business. Whether it's somebody, it's harming themselves in a relationship, whether it's dealing with substance abuse, something self-inflicted or they're displaying behaviors that are toxic and destructive, our voice can make a difference. So that was actually March in 2019 that Stepping Up, Speaking Up, and Getting Our Humanity On came out, because I think it's something that weighs heavily where we can have all these different topics that we get riled up about behind our computers. What are we doing when we see something that's wrong? What are we doing when we see something that goes against everything that we stand for? And it's about becoming passionate, and it's about those people that we see that we love and we care about, and our friends and our circle, whatever it is, that it's not staying silent. I used to tell students, I remember, man, I talked in, easily hundreds of classes over the years, right? And one of the things I would always talk about is what it means to be a real friend, and defining that. And too often, it's people not having a spine, right? Well, it's a friendship of convenience. Well, that's not friendship. It's when that person's in a bad spot, when that person needs a lifeline, it's stepping up and speaking up and doing something about it. It's not, playing therapist. It's not 911, I'm going to give it. That's for professionals, but it's passing the baton, and it's saying, yo, something's not right. Something's not kosher. So if you haven't listened to that episode, I love that episode, Stepping Up, Speaking Up, Getting Your Humanity On, March 2019. One of my other ones that I just, you can't even actually make it up. It was so interesting. We stayed at an Airbnb in Brasov, Romania. And there were so many things I had to tentatively plan before we went overseas. And so many things that fell through, or just the lines couldn't get dotted. And it was so cool how things really lined up. And I feel like God absolutely had a hand in this, where we stayed at a flat in the middle of Old City. And dude, I fell in love with Brasov. But I reached out to the woman we were actually renting from, right? Super awesome woman. And I had kind of thrown out just in left field, hey, do you know anybody that ABCD when it comes to being passionate about, whether it was dealing with, homelessness, dealing with political stuff, blah, 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 blah. And she had said, actually, one of my best friends is very, very involved with trying to alter the tide with Romanian politics. Lots of corruption, lots of things not going for the people. And her name's Silva Demeter-Lo. And so I'm sorry if I'm totally killing that one again. But it was funny. We had connected, and she said, hey, Aaron, meet me on top of this hotel here. And I was like, okay. So I walk into this hotel, and it's one of the biggest hotels in Brasov, and Brasov's not a massive city. So I walk in, I act like I'm actually staying there. I hit the floor button, go up to the top floor, and it's like literally like there's nobody there. The doors open, bing, I step out. It looked like it's like a restaurant / lounge area where there's couches and seats, but it's like empty. I'm like, all right, this is interesting. So I text her, and she's like, hey, I'm on this side of the hotel on this floor, but you have to crawl through the window. I was like, yo, man, I love this lady already. So I crawl through this. I actually went through a window, and we're out on this patio, right? And it was like just overlooking Brasov. It was beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. You could see the mountains in the background and traffic, and the little vendors down below and the different churches. And it was just, whoa. And we sat there for probably an hour and a half. And the episode's called Passion, Politics, and People. And talking about the domino effect, the ripple effect that our passions can have, that really goes hand in hand with the last episode I referenced, and having a voice, but it's taking that first step. And I know Silva has a daughter that I think is a little bit older than my son. And it was so interesting to see her passion, where it was that I'm not going against anything. I'm striving for change, and it's going towards, this message of positivity and what we can do collectively. And I was so inspired by her, not only her heart, but her mission, her outlook, and where, there's a lot of corruption everywhere. Right. And at one, probably a week of our stay, there were a number of times that there were gatherings with people really protesting what was going on, where they were not happy with the government, feeling like, where's this money that's allocated for this going to? We feel like you are not working for us. And it was pretty interesting for those of you guys who have traveled, to hear about things that I would really have not even heard about back home, and seeing it in person, and this passion that people have. What are we doing? What are we doing? What are we doing? And how are we using our voice? And that really goes hand in hand with one of my most impressionable moments of my entire life, where I had the distinct privilege of connecting, who's now a friend of mine, Stana, if you're listening to this, I just adore you, connected with Stana and went to a refugee camp in Cyprus. And we spent, I'm going to say about a month and a half in Cyprus. And this was just heavy on my heart. Hey, whenever I can do some outreach, whenever I can volunteer, count me in, right? So hopped in a car, drove about an hour and a half, 2 hours, whatever it was. And I remember driving up to the camp and seeing the gates, right? And you could see people through the gates, and just like getting kind of sucker punched, and feeling, oh my gosh, this is like things I've read about, I've seen on television, and people that, people. And now walking through these gates, and I like met Stana at the gate entrance, and just being in awe of this woman who, she was like, I drive you, it was like 500 feet up the road, but I can't fit you in my car because I have so much, stuff that is for this place and for the children here. And, bottom line, it's extracting politics from this. It's doing what's right for humanity, right? And sitting with these women, I had no intention or no thought that I would actually be able to sit down and have engaging conversations and interview people. But sitting there on this like wooden bench, right? And we actually ended up making a circle of probably like 7 or 8 women. And I can't even show the video because it shows people's faces. You're not allowed to do that. Made no reference to people's names, but where they were from. And this pursuit that these people had, chasing freedom and chasing what was best for not only themselves, but their spouses, their kids, and what they had come from. And I believe with all my heart, sitting with these people, it's like there are people going through living hell right now in so many areas of the world. And I do believe without question it's having, the proper accommodations for people that as a country that you can actually hold, but it's in screening people to make sure that it's, you're allowing people that are legitimate, that people that are, not going to be a danger to your country. But on the other end of it, where it's like, God, I remember talking with people that, the famine that's going on in Yemen, and how the government's literally not letting food in and people are dying. And how much do I really know about this? What am I doing about it? We can't do everything about everything. We can't. But what I'm saying is being aware and interjecting humanity into things, and asking questions and learning, and these people, and so many, in Syria, God, all over the world. I'm going, drawing a blank right now, but story after story after story, and just seeking freedom, seeking a new start. And I think about, as human beings, sometimes, especially when, for those of us, and if you're listening, more than likely you're in the Western, world, or you're not, or, in a first or second world country, it's so easy to kind of lapse in the state of what we have is what reality is, right? It's reality for us, but it's not reality for everybody. And what point I'm trying to get to here is that there's so many hurting people, and we cannot do everything for everybody, but we can choose small kernels, right, that we can get invested in and do something about. And I'll give you an example. So we have a drive that happens every year, and we just started going to this church a few months ago, but they do a shoebox collection, right? And you can pick the age of the kid, and they kind of have stipulations of things, to put in there and what not to put in there. And it goes, across the globe, whether that's a country in Africa or Asia, wherever, right? And it literally, will more than likely be the only present that that young person will get for the holiday season, for Christmas. And so that's one of the, the things. I have 2 boxes that's sitting on top of our fridge, shopping and getting fun things and practical things and wonderful things for someone else somewhere else. And it doesn't even have, it doesn't have to be across the globe. I'm sure 100% within your community, there are needs, 100%. I'm sure that, and it's finding ways to use our passion to pay it forward and help people. And we can get locked in this mindset that is a monetary requirement. It's absolutely not. It's volunteering our time. It's going through our neighborhood and doing a collection of, whether it's warm socks for, the homeless or for vets. It's, canned goods for the shelter up the road. It's volunteering 3 hours a week to do, to work the line, on a crisis center. There's so many opportunities to give, to become passionate about something. What are you passionate about? And I think about, as Goodness Chick has really, in 2 years, really evolved. It's changed, where my focus truly was just kind of, I don't want to say just, that's not the right word, but it was focused really on parents of teens and tweens. And this is what the focus is, and parenting tips. And my heart really kind of shifted a bit, where I still focus a bit on that. But I've watched over the years so many people that lack passion, and so many people that are just kind of floating or in that plateau of just, but like, just like, wah. And I believe in conveying a message of, what are we doing that we're really being passionate in life? We're wringing things out of life. We're living life in a way that it's just not about us. When we get self-focused, especially this time of year, right? You're listening to this now in November. It's funky time, right? But now, before 5:30, 6 o'clock at night, it's dark. It's really easy to lapse into Funky Fest. It absolutely is. It's having these protective factors in line, these tools of, what am I going to do to take that next step, right? That's what this is about, where I'm not feeling like I'm getting beaten down and pummeled by life. What am I going to do to just kick butt in life? And too many people are settling. And the lessons that I learned, right? You don't need to go around the world to learn all these lessons, but I think about, just watching so many different people, whether it was in Eastern Europe, Asia, that so many that just really people didn't have a lot of money, right? Super struggling, dealing with a lot of outreach programs out there that were just serving the community, and they were content. And so many times we get caught up in this illusion of what I think will bring me happiness. It won't. Stuff doesn't fill it. It's giving back, it's loving, it's relationships. And for me, as I shared before, my faith is a massive part of my peace, of my fulfillment. Absolutely. One of my favorite verses is Hebrews 11:1. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things unseen. And believing in something, in God, that gives me hope, gives me direction, gives me wisdom. And it's gnarly, right? Super gnarly. But finding that, in society, it's like, well, if I have this bigger car, if I have this or this, and it's so cool when we break it down about what it's really about, right? And allowing ourselves to be challenged, allowing ourselves to go outside of our comfort zone. One of the things that kind of pops in my head, I remember, when it was trying to have, like, not only tape my podcast, but have them upload, right? Well, you're in the States, you're in Canada, you're in Australia, you're wherever, in Western Europe, you're like, boop, it uploads. No problem. Hello. So I think about some of the places we were. I remember in Bali, we stayed in Kuta, right, which was a fairly decent touristy area, and having to sit in one place, right? Otherwise it would zap out. Or we were in the Nusa Islands and trying to tape a podcast episode. And it was like impossible, right? I was like, if I just stand on my left foot and I look this way at the sun, and it was like not working. And it was just the challenges involved with that. It was crazy at times. I remember having to sit in different parts of our flat, or having to go to like certain areas of a town And I would be like, please God, may there be no people around me that I can pick up on sounds, because it was what I had to deal with. And in life, it's learning, instead of being like, I give up, forget about it. It's going with it. You got to go with it. I mean, I had to tape my podcast and keep it rolling, whether I was in a jungle, or I was in a city, or I'm right here in Vero Beach, right? You just, it's a part of what I do. It's my podcast, boom, 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 coming out, and you roll with it. And sometimes, as I've explained in a lot of my podcasts when I was overseas, is saying the sound quality, I seriously wish it was better. It's not awful, but it's not 150% because I was in the jungle. Or, hey, we had, Wi-Fi for 2 hours during the day. Life is about learning. This is what builds character, learning to go with what we have, and seeking out better ways to grow, seeking out better ways for whatever we're doing to be better, but not giving up and fighting that fight and going. And it's 100 episodes. And if you were to have told me in November of 2017, I would have been around the world, right? No longer working my full-time, gig as a counselor. I'm now a speaker. You're going to have a third book on the way. You're living in Vero Beach, Florida. What? But you know what? It's where I'm at. And it's been an amazing journey. And life is a journey. And it's going with your passion and rocking things out. And I want to say, for those of you guys who have been with me, I really, really, truly appreciate from the bottom of my heart, listening, tuning in. Feel free to share this. If you're just tuning in, I encourage you to subscribe. 100 episodes. That's massive. I'm so pumped about that. Woo, 100. It's exciting. And in another 100 episodes, I'll do another jingle. I'll do another song that will be a little bit more well formatted than this one. But celebrate with me, my friends. It's so cool. I hope you'll pass this episode along to others. Get them on the goodness train if you haven't already. Let's shake some positivity, my friends. Wishing you, as we go forward into another 100 episodes, a heap of peace, love, and goodness, my friends. If you enjoyed today's episode, there's a lot more encouragement and life-kicking strategies on goodnschik.com. Have a great day, my friends.